Great. Thank you very much. Welcome everyone to this evening's board meeting, February 22nd. It is 7:01. First, I'd like to, the Board of Education would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of the Comox First Nation. We would like to thank them for the privilege of living on their land and the gift of working with their children. I am looking for someone to move the adoption of this evening's agenda. And are there any additions to the agenda? Okay, Trustee Caton.
I would like to have an addition on the agenda, please. With my error, and I do apologize. Under board business, verbal update from Provincial Council that happened last weekend to be added, please.
From PC, okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Board business, okay. Thank you. And so then looking for someone to move that motion.
I'll move it.
Thank you, Trustee Caton. And a second. Thank you, Trustee Hawksby. And all those, sorry, I'm going to do this a different way. Anyone opposed? Nope. We are good to continue on. Board meeting minutes. Looking for someone to move the January 25th regular public board meeting minutes. Thank you, Trustee May. And a second. Anyone? Thank you, Trustee McDonald. And anyone opposed? And that's carried. Looking for someone to move to adopt the minutes from our February 15th special public board meeting as presented. Thank you, Trustee McDonald. And a second. Thank you, Trustee Waite. And anyone opposed? And that is carried. All right, we have no unfinished business on our agenda. We have a record of the in-camera meeting minutes from January 25th and February 15th. I submitted a written report from my board chair's report this month, and it just refers to everything from the past month, our decision on changing the boundary, and talking about our policy 24, which kind of ties in all nicely with tomorrow, our pink shirt day. So everyone wear your pink and be kind to one another. We have no presentations or delegations. And Trustee Waite, Education Committee meeting.
Yeah, thank you. So we did not have a meeting in February. And so we are hopeful that our March meeting will take place and hopefully in person, where we learn everything that we didn't already know about our amazing operations team.
Thank you. And strategic direction. First runner-up is our Superintendent DeMayo.
Good evening, and thank you, Chair Frawley. So it's reading through some of the highlights that I'll share with you. It's really nice, I must say. When I read through these, given the past 2 years, it's really nice to see and read some of these things. I'll start with Denman Island School had just completed their literacy week, and where the whole school involved themselves in readers theater in the forest, and with nature-inspired puppets, practical literacy lessons, including cooking and making Play-Doh, and a drop everything and read day. So very successful event on the school. Congratulations to the staff and those involved. Elementary basketball is back and very, very successful. The turnout has been wonderful, and we're so pleased that those students are getting the opportunity to play. It's been very good. Along the note of basketball, I do need to pass on, and I'm going to apologize for any of the teams who I haven't seen a report from, but we have quite a few teams that did very well this past weekend. Vanier competes in 4A, and they were the North Island champions, and they won the tournament this past weekend, and now they compete in an island championship this weekend. Mark Isfeld won the AAA North Island championships, and they compete in the island championships being held at Isfeld. And the Isfeld grade 8 girls won the North Zone District Championship, and they're off to the provincials. So basketball is alive and well in our community, and it's really nice to see it. I've heard from a few people, it's nice to finally be able to sneak in and watch the kids play. For many, it's been 2 years. They haven't seen some of their children play, so it's really a great opportunity, and we're very proud of all those students and coaches for giving their time and for all the hard work and dedication that's gone into it. So thank you very much, and congratulations, teams. Cumberland. Now I might have to look at Mr. Manning to help me with this one, because this is a new game called gaga ball. Am I pronouncing that correct? And so a gaga ball pit or court, I'm not sure which one, was installed in Cumberland, and they hit the timing perfect, just in time for the wonderful weather. And this was a gift from the former industrial ed teacher, Dave Monroe, who cut, beveled, pre-positioned the brackets and got it all ready to go. And it was up, and I guess now Cumberland has a problem because they have so many kids waiting to play. One court, so many kids. So very successful. So congratulations. And thank you to Dave Monroe for his work on that and creating that for the school. Great legacy to have. In case you haven't seen, the Indigenous Education has launched their website. Great website, which reviews all the resources available, information that links to the local Comox First Nation territory, as well as the Knowledge Keepers and Indigenous Education Council. So great source of information for trustees and for the school communities. Cole Rob Road celebrated the Olympics, and they had an Olympic. They divided classes, were placed into 5 different teams, represented each by a color of the Olympic rings. They had an opening ceremony on the 14th, and Constable Paul Jones, who is a father of a student, ran with the Olympic flame around the province in 2010, and he was there to show the torch that he carried, as well as share his stories and memories of his time during that run. So it was really good to see, and quite a huge participation from the school community as they held their version of the Olympics, which was wonderful. And this is something we all can use. Airport grade 2-3 class built a kindness cart to brighten up teaching and support staff's day. They delivered notes of gratitude and encouragement along with a snack cart, which they would choose a sweet or salty snack and a cold drink. They visited all the airport school staff as well as inclusive ed. So thank you very much from that grade 2-3 class. What a great way for staff in that building to just start their day and their real act of kindness. And we really appreciate that. Another one I want to share with you at high school, and this occurred at Valentine's Day at Isfeld, as staff and students arrived, each having a personalized Valentine posted somewhere in the school. So the challenge became having roughly 1,100 Valentines around the building and having people wander through to find theirs. I didn't get a report to see if everybody did discover theirs, but I'm sure they made a great attempt at finding them. So another successful event in our school. I'd like to share a nice story regarding an initiative that was started at Quinish. And Quinish, this ties into one of their goals, which is improving reading skills. And I'll read some words from the principal. It has been an uplifting and exciting 6 weeks for our school to witness the transformation from students who told us, "I don't read," to students who are starting to believe in themselves as readers. I see it in their smiles, confidence, and their comments. I'm getting smarter with reading, as one quote was. Last year, Kyle, the principal, asked Heather Wilms, a district literacy intervention teacher, to get involved with the 9-week project. And they would support students in their school who were struggling. And the district had provided some additional resources and a program was developed. It became obvious that the challenges of the pandemic had impacted younger students' reading progress. Teachers were excited and open and planned and got involved in this wonderful project. At the end of it, in conclusion, what they have witnessed in the first 6 weeks is nothing short of amazing and heartwarming. Amazing in that after rescreening, many of their students have made significant progress in such a short time. It's making a huge difference. So there's an initiative that's supported, and the school is buying in, the staff are buying in, support from the district. It really is an excellent event. Quenisha is making a difference in the lives of their student. How much more fulfilling can it be for educators? Thank you for the support, Comox Valley Schools. So very grateful, and it goes into detail, and I'll make sure that is shared with trustees. A few other events that are occurring. We talked about the sporting events. Well, as trustees know, we have a long legacy of musical theater in our district, and we are so fortunate. Our district musical is back. Now, get your tickets, go on our website. You have to get them. They're going fast. It is SpongeBob the Musical. Now, for many of us, we're not really sure about SpongeBob or understand who SpongeBob is, but I'm going to learn. Anyway, the musical is March 8th to 12th at 7 o'clock. You can go onto our district website and follow the links and proceed to purchase tickets. It's an energetic, colorful, and joyful show suitable for all audiences of all ages. Students from throughout SD71 have been working to bring your favorite characters to life. Watch as they come together to save their world with positivity, teamwork, entertaining song and dance. And as I say, tickets, information on sale is on our website. So I'd encourage trustees to, if you have an opportunity to get in and catch it, it's students from all our schools, wonderful event. Once again, our SD71 robotics team continue to have strong showings. Our senior team were tournament champions at the recent tournament on the 12th of February. And two other teams, teams 784-2A and 784-2D, were also in the finals for the day, but couldn't take down the powerful senior team. Teams will compete for a coveted spot in the VEX Robotic Championships in Dallas, Texas, where teams from all over the world will take part. So Director Dixon was at that tournament, and maybe you can share, Director Dixon, a couple of the highlights for you.
It was amazing at the time seeing so many youth from all across the island hold their heads high and just interact and communicate with each other around robotics. And our district should be very proud of these young men and women because they know what they're talking about. They're fiercely competitive and they're really collaborative with each other. So it was amazing to attend my first robotics tournament. I'm sure we'll have many more ahead with our youth. Thank you.
Thank you. And a couple of wonderful stories to share with you. A former Isfeld student, Sydney Sutherland, has just recently published a children's book entitled I'm Everything in Between. The book came to life after Sydney got the idea when working on her capstone project last year. It received a lot of positive feedback from teachers and peers encouraging her to publish it. I Am Everything in Between is a book that highlights kids who don't fit into stereotypical gender ideals. This book celebrates children and how the gender identify by sending a positive message that regardless of biological gender, it's okay to feel like a girl, it's okay to feel like a boy, it's okay to feel like everything in between. Release date for the book is March 15th, so congratulations to Sydney Sutherland on publishing that book and getting that out there, and that's just wonderful news. As well, a student at August Jones from Glacier View is an inspiring artist, and the shirt, sorry, was the designer of the pink shirt for this year's Pink Shirt Happening. The theme of the shirt is Be Bright, Be Bold, Be You. I create my own stories and create a huge variety of characters to one day use for a comic. I enjoy drawing things others might be scared to. I enjoy drawing flaws and what others might dislike about themselves, but from the artistic perspective, I find them fascinating and pretty. All of my art is about diversity and positivity, said August. The lovely people that I have chosen to draw are people of different races and genders. I chose that because of lack of representation. I choose to try to give as much representation to everyone because everyone has been bullied once in their life, and it's sad that it's so normalized to be made fun of or harassed for just being you. So congratulations to August for her work and for her design being selected. And just an example of the amazing things that are occurring in our schools that happen every day. So that's it for some news, and it's just a small sampling of what's happening.
Thank you. Trustee Caton.
Find my mute, but so thank you, Superintendent DeMayo. It's amazing all the great things happen in our district. It totally amazes me, especially during the time of COVID and all the restrictions that we've had. But I do have a question for you through the chair regarding the announcement that the ministry made this week about the distribution of the COVID test. And I'm wondering how our district, I've been asked by a parent today, that's why I'm asking you, because I was unclear of the answer. So I'm putting it on your shoulders because that's your job, is what process will our district do in distributing those kits, especially at the elementary school level, and how will that happen over the next week or two as they come into the district? Thank you.
Sure. Great question. And I can tell you this is one that we're learning a little bit about every day. The kits are being shipped directly to schools. And we have asked the schools, once they receive the kits, as one of our schools did today, they are to distribute those kits to students as they would distribute the photos or any other process where it goes to each individual student and then home from there. And I do believe, Director Dixon, it's a box of 5 for every student. Is that correct?
That is correct. We've started receiving shipments to our schools, and we're working with each of our schools to confirm when they receive it and how they're going to deliver it. What we want to do is make sure that our schools know best the safest way to get those kits into the hands of families. So we're working with each school to ensure that they come up with a plan that best suits their learning environment, their school families.
We're not necessarily told which school is getting them and in which order. Initially, we were told the remote sites would get them first, but today we had a school in Comox receive theirs. So we're not really sure of how they're being distributed. So we're just trying to stay on top of it and find out when the schools receive them. We'll make sure we have a list so we make sure all our schools get them and then their plan for distributing them.
The good news is we're getting them now. So they're coming into our families.
And just a follow-up question. My children, when they were in school, were notorious for not giving their parents some of the stuff that was handed out from the school. And I'm wondering if a parent is understanding that their school has distributed the kits and for some reason their child is on their child's backpack, what process that they are, just phone the principal and do a follow-up and to find out where it may be. And because we all know sometimes children don't always bring things home to mom and dad or their guardians like they're supposed to.
Yeah, we'll encourage schools to send out, as they normally do, a weekly notification home to let families know that, hey, the tests have arrived and you should be receiving one. They were sent out yesterday, whatever the time frame is. And any questions, if they don't, please contact the school and we'll work with the schools to ensure that those families do get tests.
Thank you.
Thank you. So are we on to Assistant Superintendent then?
Yes,
Okay. Your turn, Assistant Superintendent Manning.
Thank you, Chair Frawley. I just wanted to spend a little bit of time to give you a quick update on our registrations and enrollment. As of only about an hour ago, we have 464 new kindergarten students registered for next school year. Craig Sorokin, our manager of communications, is working on an ad campaign that has been successful as those start to trickle in a little bit heavier now. I should let you know that Beauregard is projecting about 570 Ks, so we're almost 100 Ks behind right now, but it's very site specific. Some sites have been filling up rather quickly, so that's why we sent out the ad to encourage families and parents to get in there and register as quickly as possible so we can get a good handle on those numbers. I should add that we've had 89 additional registrations for students who are not in kindergarten come in so far this year, and that would be grades 1 to 12. And Beauregard, or we are projecting, not Beauregard, we are projecting 200 more students approximately than we had at the fall of last school year. So we continue to grow, continue to look forward to receiving new registrations, and we'll keep updating you as those occur. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for Assistant Superintendent Manning? I'm quickly looking through the screen here. Nope, don't see anything. Okay, then we are on to our Secretary Treasurer Hooker. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to let the board and the public know that we did issue a media release last week regarding the Cumberland Child Care. So we have initiated the process. We've had the construction transfer from Cumberland, the village of Cumberland, to the district. So we're starting on looking at the design of the center and getting it out to a request for proposals. So just an update that we're underway. The transition has happened, and Ian and his team within operations are looking at getting construction started as soon as possible.
Thank you. Any questions for Secretary Treasurer Hooker? Okay. We are on to Human Resources, Retirements and Recognitions. You can take it away, Trustee Waite.
Great, thank you. So I have one retirement to share with everyone tonight. So Deidre Merrick, an education assistant with Inclusive Education, will be retiring effective June the 29th after 16 years of service. And we thank you very much for your commitment and dedication to the students in our school community.
Thank you. That brings us to our board standing committee reports. Finance Committee board report. I will turn that over to Trustee Caton.
Thank you, Chair. So we had quite a really good meeting, and we have a number of things to report out to the board tonight, with one major important one, which is the passing of our 2021 amended annual budget that we have to do every year. But I would like to highlight a couple of things we talked about. And the first one is that the committee discussed probabilities for a memorial bursary for former trustee Elizabeth Bunny Shannon. And we would like to consider a one-time bursary option similar to the bursary in honor of former Secretary Treasurer Sheldon Lee. The committee also discussed what the criteria could be associated with the bursary, and staff will prepare a briefing note for the committee to review and then add it to the March public board meeting with the recommendation for the board approval. I just wanted to give people, we talked about it, and this is the process that we're going through, and you'll see that attached and that all that information attached to your agenda. We had a financial update from the capital fund update, and I wonder if Director Candace Hilgen, would you like to add anything to that? I mean, it's pretty straightforward, but it's a good to review our capital funding update regularly so people know where we are and where our money is going and how we do things in the district.
All good, nothing to add, Janice. Happy to answer questions if there are any.
Okay, any questions? Thank you. And then the next one is we looked at the amended annual budget package, and the Secretary Treasurer Brenda Hooker provided us some highlights of the documents. And I'm going to turn this over to our Secretary Treasurer to maybe give us some highlights of the things that we need to be looking at, things that might have changed in the last little while, and any questions. I'm going to put them through to her to answer as to why numbers are where they are. And before I do that, I would like to acknowledge our senior leadership and our staff. We're in a pretty good position compared to other districts, and I thank you for your leadership in that. And reading the government's budget today and the education budget for next year, I'm glad that we were a very cautious district and we spent our money very wisely, because it looks like things are going to be a little bit tighter for the next little while, especially with inflation costs coming along. So thank you again, Secretary Hooker. And I'm going to turn over to you to give us the highlights and things we need to know before we pass our budget tonight.
Thank you, Chair Caton. So as trustees may recall, every spring we prepare an annual budget based on the projections that we submit to the ministry mid-February. Then once we actually have our student enrollment that arrives in September, we do what's called a 1701 count. And then from that, the ministry revises their funding for districts. And then once we have the revised funding that comes out mid-December, we are required to prepare and present to the ministry an amended annual budget. And so this document that's before you this evening is the amended annual budget based on our September 30th, 1701 enrollment counts and the ministry funding that corresponds with that. So the budget before you reflects the updates from last year's estimates to our actuals. And it is a balanced budget that we're presenting for you this evening. And it includes some strategic spending that the board approved when we did our financial statements as of June 30th and approved in September. So we made some decisions around some spending from our reserves. And the amended annual budget does also reflect the increased enrollment that we've been talking about since September, and the number of challenges and opportunities that increased enrollment has presented the district. And but along with the increased enrollment, of course, there's increased costs. There's support that the students require. So the amended budget that's before you still contains a 2.5% contingency reserve. And you'll notice that the special purpose funds are also increased, and our capital spending does reflect the decisions we made in the financial statement. So what I'd like to do is walk you through the board report. And so I'm just going to share my screen and we can go through that document. And if I can find it. So this is the amended annual budget report. Can everyone see my screen? Okay. And it just kind of highlights for trustees the changes that were in the annual budget and then the amended annual budget. So you can see in this first table that there is that revenue has increased, but expenses have also increased. And at the end of the day, it's all balanced still. So the increased enrollment reflected an increase in our overall revenue. You can see there's enrollment changes plus some changes in the other sources of revenue to net out to a $3.9 million increase in revenue. And the next page of the report indicates where those changes were from. Predominantly, it was due to enrollment increases. And this table just is kind of a graphic to show where the additional, the differences and the additional revenue came from. Of note is the enrollment decline. When we prepared our annual budget last spring, we were anticipating the growth that we saw in our online school nights. to revert back to their regular schools, which were not always within this district. So we were actually anticipating a decline in enrollment, and we thought we might be in funding protection because of that. Instead, we saw a net increase in our enrollment by 100 students. So we did see a decline in NIDES enrollment, but not as much as we had anticipated. And then we saw an increase in bricks and mortar enrollment. So overall, that's what's reflected in the overall increase for revenue. And again, our enrollment in our online school, it continues to be strong. The above estimates include an increase from what we originally forecast in our February enrollment count, which was just submitted last week, by another 477,000. So we continue to see strong and uptake with the online school, which is good news for the district. So this is just a little bit of the other ministry grants that we get and where some of the other increases have come from. And as you know, we saw an increase in our, for example, rentals and leases, because we originally had our facilities closed, but then we were able to open them up as COVID restrictions relaxed. So then we did start to see some revenue beyond what we had forecast. So that's the revenue, and you can find this information in the actual amended annual budget document in your agenda package. So the revenue is listed on pages 32 and 33 of your agenda package. And so that's schedules 2 and 2A in the document that we submit to the ministry. And then from that, then we look at what our expenses are and the change in the expenses. So you can see in this table that our expenses are projected to be 3.7 million higher than what we anticipated in the annual budget. And that increase is mainly due to 19 additional teachers that were required to support the additional enrollment. And we saw an increase in the average teacher salary. As well, we have an increase in the educational assistants, and because our enrollment growth, we also had some enrollment growth within our inclusive education department. So then those students require some additional support. So the increase in educational assistance is a reflection of that as well. All of our employee groups saw a 2% salary increase last year. So that's also reflected in those costs. And of course, when the salaries go up, the benefits go up as well. So we're seeing an increase in the employee benefits, which is another large part of the increase in costs. Additionally, with the additional students, we see some requirement for additional services and supplies and supports for those students. So another $2 million of the budget you have before you is from increases to services and supplies, etc. So, and on the following page, it highlights where those additional expenses came from. Predominantly, again, it's to support the students attending the NIDES programs. So in addition, we have the feasibility study, the environmental study that we're undertaking. We did some pre-engineering on future capital projects, and also moving the modulars off of Hornby Island are part of the services increases that you saw. As well, we've seen some increases in supplies due to COVID impacts and costs related for the outdoor classrooms and the ventilation improvement projects that the board has approved. So those additional expenses can be found in schedules 2B and 2C, which are on page 34 to 39 of your budget package. Sorry, 40. Page 40 of your agenda package. Did anyone have any questions regarding the revenue or expenses that are in the amended budget at this point?
I have a question regarding expenses there, if that's okay.
Sure.
And it goes to transportation. And I know that we have a contract with First Student to service and bus our students to and from in school, which is great. But I'm wondering, because the price of fuel has increased quite substantially, has this had an impact on our transportation cost, or is that included within the contract that we've had with them that we're not going to be impacted yet, covering some of those increased costs?
Part of the increase that you see there is a slight change in the contract due to the enhanced cleaning from the COVID requirements. And then I'll let Ian answer the question on the fuel charges.
Sure. The way the fuel charge works for our busing contract is that we agree on a base level at the start of the contract, say $1 a liter. And then we actually, they purchase all their fuel through one of the contract providers, and they specify what the cost is each month, and we pay the difference in that cost. So yes, as fuel goes up, we end up paying more for our transportation.
Thank you. Any other questions at this point?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
So it's Michelle. I'm not sure what you can see on your screen. So it's page 45 of our agenda package.
Okay.
And it's to do with the revenue increase that has come in due to enrollment changes, specifically on special needs level 2. So it looks like we have an increase of 75 students from our original projection that are special needs level 2. And the funding that's attached to that is, it looks like almost 1.6 million. And I was just wondering if somebody could provide me with information on what those funds would normally be used for to support students of that need category. Some of them feel obvious to me, but I'm sure I'm missing quite a few. So just wondering if somebody could share that.
Sure, that's a great. Did you want to take that question, Director Lamoureux?
Thank you, Trustee Waite. The funds get used in a variety of ways. Specifically, we've increased EAs to be able to support the students that are needing that extra support. Resources, technology as an example, an order went in for talkers for students who are complex communication needs. And so those are the main things that it ends up going to. And it also goes obviously back to the district because there's a variety of other things that are shared within the district.
And
Can I ask how are we able to pivot to be able to anticipate that we might need to find these resources? I guess I haven't noticed this line before that it's increased so much. How do we traditionally plan when we're not sure? What's your trick?
We're fortunate in our district that, at the start, we try to put as much as we can right into, the hands of supporting students. But we also recognize that throughout the year, we're going to, have an increase in students who are level 1 or level 2 and level 3. So usually in cases like that, each month we're identifying students that are being categorized through the ministry. And so when that occurs, I'll often meet with finance and we'll sit down and go, okay, what are our needs moving forward? And finance, knowing that we have a February count, is very generous in providing me with what I need to be able to move forward to ensure that all our students, have the resources that they need. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I see Trustee McDonald has a question.
Yeah, thanks. This sort of circles back to the question of fuel costs and our busing contract. So I am interested because our many districts are beginning to electrify their fleets. They're very big capital expenditure for an electric bus, but the long-term operating costs are significantly lower in my understanding. But because we work on a contract, I'm interested in whether or not we have any influence towards that, whether those grants are available to the busing company, and whether we could do something in partnership with them. This might not be a thing to answer right now, but I am interested in whether we're having conversations about it and whether those budget calculations are being made as there's an environmental outcome, and there might also be a positive budget if we were able to fund the capital costs with them, that in a way that resulted in reducing the constant rising gas prices.
So I'll turn that over to Director Hesselgrave to comment on those discussions.
Sure, it's a good question. I know the ministry is supporting purchase of electric buses. They, of course, if we want to look at a purchase because we have a contract provider, we can't. And I know that First Student, as a pan North American company, has a number of trials going. But what I'd have to do is check in with our local area manager, probably the Western Canadian one. And what I'll commit to is checking with that person to see if they have any initiatives underway for areas for districts like ours.
Thank you, Director. Is there any other questions at this point, or should I continue with the overview of the report? I don't see any other questions. So as I mentioned, it is a balanced budget. We still have retained the accumulated operating surplus for the contingency reserve of 2.5 million. And additional information can be found on Schedule 1 of the report, which is back on page, 31 of your board package. Page 5 of the ministry documents, page 31 of the board package. And so then on to special purpose funds. So as you can see, there was a significant increase in special purpose funds. Again, that was mainly due to an increase in the classroom enhancement fund due to increased enrollment, as well as some additional funding. We saw the safe return to class fund of 227,000, as well the mental health in schools of 120,000, and our First Nation student transportation grant of 56,000. So again, the special purpose funds are in and an out. So we receive the revenue and we budget to spend all of the revenue. And those can be found on Schedule 3 and 3A of your board package, which is on page 35 and 36 of the board package. So lastly, we have the capital schedules. And again, this is where the application of some of the strategic planning to draw down the reserve is reflected. So we have some differences in amortization, which is just the way the ministry records funding for school district assets, and then we reduce them over time. As well, we have the 1,560,000 that the board has authorized as a transfer from operating fund to local capital every year to align with the strategic planning. And then the additional amounts reflected in the documents this year are 2,420,000, which are made up of the allocation for the 9 remaining outdoor classrooms at 720. The project to implement an ardent fire suppression system, as well as the Huban mechanical access project, the transfer to board office reserve, and the renewal for the Marquesville entrance, as well as additional IT costs that we're seeing. The cost of hardware is increasing as well due to COVID. So I see that Sheila has a question regarding this.
I'm sorry, I didn't think to ask when we looked at it at the previous meeting, but what is the Marcusville entrance renewal project?
So that was a strategic decision that we made to upgrade the entrance at the school and make it more accessible, and do some new signage. But I can let Director Hesselgrave talk a bit more about what that project is.
Okay, thank you. There's a couple of things that we're doing at Isfeld. It is a school where we have many of our larger events, and the traffic flow in the entrance is very poorly designed, and we end up with we put a lot of people at risk, you know, and so what we're attempting to do out of this is make the entrance, as the Secretary Treasurer said, more accessible, easier to get into if you're moving on your own, like if you're walking or biking. The other piece of it that we're trying to do is ensure that we create some form of outdoor learning space that actually works for the school. So off of where the right now the inclusive education room is, we're going to tie in an outdoor classroom, and we're going to make that outdoor classroom accessible. And in the front entrance area, we're going to put a fair bit of outdoor furniture, because we're going to get rid of the whole lane for vehicle traffic, and we're going to flow the traffic around in a circle, in essence, through that lot, because we just get a lot of really poor behavior from the drivers of the world going through there. So we're trying to clean that up and just really make some better modifications to the entrance to make it more friendly to people that are walking and certainly accessing the facility.
Thank you, Director Hesselgrave. Did that answer the question, Trustee McDonald?
Yeah, that sounds like a good thing to do and interesting. It sure does get a lot of in normal days, in normal times, as we once remember, it got a lot of traffic for sure.
So so again, as I mentioned, this is a balanced budget we're bringing for you, and staff is recommending that the Board of Education proceed to all 3 readings of the budget this evening, and we're hopeful that you will. So in addition to the budget documents, we've got the snapshot document that we presented last year. It's kind of a more user-friendly way to talk about the budget than the ministry template or this boring report. So it's on page 52 and 53 of your agenda package. And if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer, but that's a quick overview of the amended budget.
So pause, but I think I'm going to start with the first reading of the recommendations, if that's acceptable with everybody as chair of the committee. Thanks. So I'm going to move the following recommendation: that the 2021-22 amended annual budget be giving its first reading.
Sorry. Is it? Oh, there we go.
Yes. Sorry. This way we can see better.
Okay. And sorry, I just drew a complete blank. Trustee Caton.
Yes, Trustee Chair Crowley.
It's okay. Trustee Caton moved the bylaw, so we
I
need
moved
to
the recommendation for the first reading.
Okay, and
Okay,
I see trustee Christy Masak seconded.
thank you, trustee May. And anyone opposed? Okay,
And I'll do the second one, the recommendation that the 2021-2022 amended annual budget be given a second reading.
and do we have a second for that? Thank you, trustee Hawkesby.
And Chair Frawley, do you want to explain the process for the next recommendation and why we need to make it and why it's important that we all approve it, or we're coming back here in 48 hours, do this all over again?
Absolutely. Thank you, trustee Caton, for that reminder. So what happens when we're doing all three readings? The first and second one and the final one can all be by majority. The third reading, which is the one that says to receive all three readings, must be unanimous. Now, what's important to realize is that even though you say that you approve it, it doesn't mean that you have to be for it in the final reading. And if we don't do it tonight, and we, as trustee Caton said, we'll be back in 48 hours because we have to pass our amended budget by the end of February. So here we are.
Thanks. So I'll make the following recommendation: that in accordance with section 68(4) of the School Act, all three readings of the 2021-22 amended annual budget be given at tonight's meeting.
Okay, second for that motion. Thank you, trustee McDonald. And all those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us, and there are only 6 of us here this evening, so that's unanimous. Thank you, everybody. And now we can move on to the final.
And the last recommendation, that the 2021-22 amended annual budget be given third and final reading.
And a second, oh, there we have trustee Hawkesby. And anyone opposed to this evening's amended budget being passed third and final reading?
Thank you very much. That's much appreciated.
And then my last recommendation for the Finance Committee report, before I say that, I would like to thank once again our Secretary Treasurer, Director Candace Hilton, and the senior leadership for bringing us a budget that is balanced, it's conservative. We're supporting our students and our schools like we need to do it. And thank you for doing that. It's really much appreciative. And this is one of those budgets over 13 years I can breathe when I pass it because it's a positive one. So thank you. So, but I see trustee McDonald has her hand up. So I'm going to, before I speak any further, I don't want to interrupt Sheila. Did you want to say anything, Sheila?
Well, I did. And I'm really sorry that I didn't leap in as we were on this item. And it relates back to the suggestion to have a scholarship for our former trustee Elizabeth Shannon, who passed away recently. And I absolutely agree with you for thanking for all the work that was done on this budget. But I know I did want to draw attention to everyone, all the thousands of people watching this at home online, that the school district does have charitable status, and that we do issue tax receipts for donations and grants of sometimes goods in kind, musical instruments, things like that. There is a protocol, the Administrative Procedure 526, which is on the page 21 and 22 of this agenda. And I don't know that the public are aware of that there is a possibility to contribute in really meaningful ways to the school district, and that we welcome discussions about that. And that we also have a fund set up at the Comox Valley Community Foundation that could receive small or large bequests of any kind, and that people who are interested in supporting the school district and the work that our students do, or we do with our students, we have a lot of ways to do it. So I feel like we kind of went by something that actually was quite important and worth promoting. So thank you very much for letting me just have a quick word.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie, bringing that forward. And I believe Secretary Treasurer Brenda Hook, and I believe that we have a number of, over the years, community members and individuals that have donated to the school district for bursaries and on that one there. And I think that there's a process, just connect with you, Secretary Treasurer Brenda Hooker, that if someone who's listening tonight or that, if they wish to make, to talk about that, your office, best for your office to connect to. Am I correct with that? Follow up on Sheila's conversation. Okay, thanks. So I'll make the following motion for for the Finance Committee report, is that the Board of Education for School District 71 received the Finance Committee report as presented.
And thank you, Trustee McDonald. And anyone opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. That brings us to our next committee, the Budget Advisory Committee, and I will turn that over to the chair, Chair McDonald.
Thank you very much. We had our first meeting as a group of this year's Budget Advisory Committee on February 15th, and we had a full collection of our senior staff and finance people. We had our partner groups, 2 representatives from all of our partner groups, CDTA, QP, PVP, DPAC, the Indigenous Education Council, and it was a really great meeting. Secretary Treasurer Hooker presented us with an overview, and we had some general discussion about the timeline in terms of reference and preliminary discussions, but we were at that point waiting for information from the budget, and we are still waiting for other information that will be forthcoming in our grant. And our next meeting will be on April 12th. So well after spring break, and staff finance department will have had a chance to look at it and put some preliminary numbers together for us. So Secretary Treasurer, did you want to highlight any of the things from your presentation or have a briefing to all of us at this point?
No, I think you covered it very well. So that was the initial meeting. We reviewed the annual budget process and how we start with our projections and then move forward to developing an annual budget. We outlined our plans for consultation and the next meeting timeline. So it's all available in the board package. If anyone has any questions, the Chair McDonald or myself would be happy to answer.
Trustee Caton.
Thank you. I don't like this Zoom stuff, it's to get confused at times. So I'm just wondering, and I guess I'm curious, because when I read the BCSDA, I guess, outlook or update on the budget, it basically talked about the K-12 sector, but falls short of covering increased educational costs for districts. So it sounds to me, and I know it's too early to tell because we're not going to get that till the Friday before spring break, and to do that one there, that it sounds like the warnings we were giving at Academy is that money is going to be tight for the K-12 sector, and that the funding is not going to be where we need to provide a fulsome what we want to do for next one. Is that the scenario that we're looking at, or we just really need to, because that's the indication I've gotten from all the BCSTA Newsweekly updates and the other information on there, is that we're looking at a budget that is not going to meet the needs we're looking at for next year with all the basics. Is that what we're looking at, or is it too early to tell?
Well, I mean, we've been getting those signals for the last couple of years from the Ministry of Education that we wouldn't be looking at, unfortunately, increases in our annual facility grant or necessarily the per student funding, etc. So the details will come out March 15th once we see what the actual per student funding and the categories and allocations that they're making. And then we'll be able to prepare from there. But I think as a province, we can recognize the challenges that COVID has presented. And, you know, the atmospheric river and the flooding and the fires that have happened have really put pressure on the provincial budget. So, you know, we can anticipate that it's not going to be Christmas in March, I think it's fair to say. And, you know, I guess time will tell what the actual numbers are. We're not, there hasn't been any signals of rollbacks. We've been assured that our annual facility grant funding will stay the same, which was good news for the operations department. But I don't think we can expect anything extra. So.
And I guess the point of bringing that up as we move forward is we really need to be realistic in our expectations of what we can and cannot do as a district, because while the money has stayed the same, inflationary cost, as Director Hesselgrave will know, is a little bit higher than it was last year when you go out and you get stuff. And when you're looking at cost factors and on that one, so I think that I just want to be clear to say that status quo doesn't mean extra. Status quo means we have to really be efficient on where we target our monies to support the most students we can and be realistic on that one there. And that's just my point of bringing it up when I read the budget numbers today. Right, Christmas in March is not going to happen. It's going to be like a bit of a lean year coming up.
Yes. Yeah.
But a challenge, BCSTA Chair Stephanie Higginson noted that we're looking at a lot of the extreme pressure and growth in the province of our numbers. And so the ministry is funding the extra growth, which in fact, at times in the past, they did not really even do that. So, but that in particular, she said that there's no money being put forward for being able to fund modulars and portables to accommodate those students out of a ministry budget rather than their own operations. So that was disappointing. And a lot of the things that the education sector had put forward that had been received well by the Joint Finance Committee and were cited in the report, there's no sign of them at this time. So, but $48 million more over 3 years for independent schools.
Okay.
Yeah, any other questions? Should we have a motion to receive that report?
Yes, please.
Well, I'll move it. Someone will second it.
I was just going to say, should I make it? Because it was you and I that were there. So
That's
one
right.
of us has to do it. So I'll move it.
All right, I will certainly second that. We were there.
And anyone opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, Trustee McDonald. Policy Committee Board Report. I will pass this over to Trustee Waite.
Great, thank you. So the Policy Committee met on February the 7th, and we're working on creating a childcare policy. That's the next policy that the committee's working on to be able to bring forward to the board. And the future policies that we discussed that we believe we'll need to be looking at next would be a policy 7 regarding the trustee election bylaw, and policy 8 board committees and the procedural bylaws would be the next committee or the next policies that the committee would like to work on. And our next meeting is on Monday, March 7th. And I would like to move that the Board of Education for School District 71 receive the Policy Committee Board Report as presented.
Thank you. And we have Trustee May who's seconding. And anyone opposed? And that is carried. Thank you, Trustee Waite. Okay, we're on to Facilities Committee of the Whole Board Report from February 8th. I will turn it over to our Secretary Treasurer to go through her briefing note and introduce our 2 special guests we have here this evening.
Thank you, Chairperson. So we're bringing to the board a request to consider a bylaw to purchase a property that the district would use for administrative purposes. So in your board package from page 73 through to page 78, you'll find the supporting documentation for the recommendation that staff is making. So on the briefing note, it starts on page 73. So the briefing note was prepared to kind of do an overview of how we got to this place with considering a property purchase. So in the fall this year, as I mentioned earlier, we saw enrollment growth that we weren't expecting. And we started to realize that we needed to seriously look at how we could reclaim some classroom space throughout the district. Currently, our administrative functions as a district are dispersed in 6 different locations and often are housed within vacant classroom spaces, which aren't necessarily designed for the purpose that we're currently using them for. So the board recognized the challenge back in September. We generated as an operations department request for proposals to go out to tender to look at functional space analysis for the district. And then in the meantime, we were out to tender on that. We were reviewing the proponents that submitted applications. We discovered the potential opportunity to purchase a vacant BCAA property located at 2488 Idians Way. And, you know, we reviewed that potential as we went through December and January and looked at a number of pre-purchase due diligence factors. We had the property reviewed by an architect. We looked at our current administrative space analysis where they're housed. We also looked at the real estate market. We consulted with we did a level 1 environmental assessment on the property. And so throughout all that due diligence, we felt that it was a prudent decision, that it would be a cost-effective, timely solution to some of the administrative challenges around administrative space throughout the district. But back to the briefing note, so that's how we started this process in September. But the challenge around administrative space for the district started back in the early 2010s. So we were looking at a tripartite agreement with the City of Courtenay and the Comox Valley Regional District. And we did some property transactions, and we actually sold the current board office in that. And at the end of the day, the district at that time decided not to proceed with going in on a joint office construction project because the cost became prohibitive. But we secured a 99-year lease on the current administrative office at 607 Cumberland Road. So this has been a challenge for a number of years. The district has been working on that. And when the original transaction with the city and the regional district occurred in 2016, the 99-year lease was secured, but there was always the intention to look at replacing the original board office that has since been sold, or what other opportunities we had to house the administrative functions within the district. So at the time, in 2016, the transaction to sell the current board office was initiated. It was completed in the sale in the spring of 2021, and those funds have been set aside. But also at that time, the board started authorizing some money to be set aside for administrative board office functions every year. So we've been transferring, and that's been reflected in our local capital reserve reports, which we saw earlier this evening as part of the Finance Committee update, as well as in our financial statements. So notes 12 and 19 in our financial statements throughout the years have tracked how we've anticipated the need for administrative functions and have been setting aside capital reserve dollars for that purpose. So on the briefing note, we talk about how we got to this place where we're in a current 99-year lease on the current administrative building, but it's really not large enough for our administrative functions in the district. And so that with increasing enrollment exceeding our expectations, we know that there's sustained growth going forward that we need to address this challenge. So in the November in-camera committee of the whole, we've been having a number of facility committee of the whole meetings because when you're looking at property and land, that's an in-camera transaction until you're ready to bring it out of camera and talk about the opportunity publicly. So in the November meeting, we talked about the immediate enrollment pressure at the south end of the district, which the board dealt with last week, and then the unexpected enrollment pressure in the Courtenay East Comox corridor. And, you know, down the road, how we anticipate that perhaps we might have some challenges around the Glacier View catchment. And these are all based on the in-migration that we're seeing in the valley, as well as increased enrollments and projections going forward. And the number of properties that are being constructed. We know that there's 2,500 units in our analysis that's being, sorry, that there's plans for throughout the valley. So that's a significant amount of housing, and we anticipate to see some, you know, increased enrollment from that. So, sorry, I apologize. So we also, that was when we also had learned of the potential property at Idian's Way. So 2488 Idian's Way is a office building that BCAA, so the BC Assessment Authority, had. And now they're looking at changing their structure and amalgamating to the Nanaimo offices. So they were considering it a surplus property. They were making it available to other public sector organizations. So we did some initial analysis of the property, and we had our proponents, Cornerstone, do a high-level needs assessment to see whether it would help us. Oh, thank you, Jeff. I apologize. I just got a water delivery. Oh, that's better. Thank you. You know, whether it would suit our needs. At that time, all of the due diligence we had done indicated that we should continue forward. So we had our facility staff do a thorough review of the property. We had hired an architect to do a field review of the property and a high-level building codes compliance review, as well as the space analysis that was ongoing. And of course, we hired a real estate professional, Mr. Kevin Reed, to help us navigate the transaction. So based on all of the due diligence that we had conducted up until that point, we submitted a conditional offer of purchase and sale to BCAA in early December, which they accepted December 15th. Since then, we've continued to with our due diligence, making sure that it really was a property that would suit the district's needs long-term. And so we're bringing that to the board for consideration. And I'll just go through before I turn it over to Cornerstone and then Mr. Reed, I'll just go through the points on the briefing note. So, as I mentioned, our current administrative functions throughout the district are very dispersed. We have 6 different locations, which isn't really efficient or effective. It made sense to house administrative functions in schools when we were in declining enrollment. But as we've seen significant enrollment pressures, we need to reclaim those classroom spaces. So for example, our projections for 2023, we're going to have 10 of our schools beyond their 10-year enrollment projections that we anticipated just last February at this time when we did our long-range facility plan. So we've seen significant enrollment growth that is driven by the migration from larger metro and even up island. So from Victoria North and then for larger metro and also from out of province even. So we're seeing significant interest in residing in this beautiful location. And so then, so just as an example, the 5 classrooms at Airport that we're looking to reclaim by purchasing this property, if we did modular classrooms instead of purchasing this potential property, that would be 1.5 million for the dry modulars at 305,000 each. And that would be placing them on our existing property. So just to put the potential purchase price in context. And again, another critical point around the modular classrooms is that funding was mentioned earlier this evening, comes out of operating dollars. It doesn't come out of the local capital reserve that we've been setting aside from the sale of this current board office and annually anticipating that we know we have this need, that our current space is not meeting our administrative needs. And then another really important point is some of the departments have outgrown the space they're currently in. For example, Indigenous education ran a module that was placed in 2011. At that time, they had less than 1,000 students that identified as Indigenous heritage. Now we're at 1,535 students. So that's a 62% growth in the amount of students that department is servicing in the same space. So they're really, challenged for space, and they need a more appropriate space for the size of the department that they have. And again, as I mentioned, we've been doing our due diligence. The transfer would happen between 2 public sector organizations. So it means that it's based on a property assessment in September of 21. It's not based on current real estate market prices. And, we've been doing our due diligence around making sure that this is an appropriate suggestion to put before the board. So with that overview of the board briefing note and the bylaw, I will turn it over to Director Hasselgrave if he wants to add anything, and then maybe we'll start with Quentin from Cornerstone, and then Mr. Reid and I'll do a wrap up at the end.
I think we'll just let them jump right into their presentation. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so did you want to introduce Quentin?
Here we go. Quentin, are you ready?
I'm ready, yeah.
So we have Quentin Talbot-Kelly here, who's a principal with Cornerstone Planning Group, and we've had the great pleasure of working with them for the past few months. We're on this project to really quantify what our needs are and break them down into a manageable way. So I'll let Quentin take this on.
Sounds good. I'll just share my screen quickly. So yes, my name is Quentin Talbot-Kelly. I am a partner at Cornerstone Planning Group. And so we have been the selected group to take on this piece of work. We're calling it a feasibility study, but it also did include a space needs assessment, as Brenda and Ian have mentioned. So today's presentation is really to take you through some of the key findings of the report. There's quite a lot of detail, obviously, that we couldn't get into here, just because it is quite a large piece of work that we did complete. But I think this is going to be the most relevant stuff for this group. So first, I just want to orient everybody to the study intentions. And so what were the goals of this piece of work? And so as Brenda had noted, the primary goal for this study was to make sure that we were identifying all space accommodation options that increase teaching space at 2 primary locations. So Airport Elementary and Glacier View Secondary Center, so more teaching space. The second study goal was to decrease the administrative fragmentation across the region, so from 6 facilities, hopefully to less. And then third, and lastly, to address any functional space challenges of the existing locations. So Indigenous education is a great example, where they clearly just don't have enough space. So that would be an example of a functional space challenge that potentially this study could address. So the approach and timeline. So we started this project mid-November, and we're anticipating it will be complete at the end of February. So that's roughly about 3 months of actual work time. We broke down the work into 5 different phases, beginning with understanding the current context analysis. So really doing a deep dive into the existing services, the existing physical spaces, and understanding the characteristics that are good and bad about those. We moved into the future context analysis, and so that's trying to estimate the needs not just for today, but sort of the 10-year future. So we used a 10-year planning horizon to identify any of the space requirements, so that we're not having the same conversation in 1 or 2 years. From there, we developed a facility functional program. So that's a space-by-space list of all of the space requirements to support all of the administrative functions of SD71. And then with all of that information, then we started looking at site and development options. And so we developed, I think we looked at originally 8, we narrowed it down to 6, and then we actually presented 4 within the report. And then throughout this whole process, the standard reporting and documentation was created. So the current state admin space. So I've tried to summarize this to 3 slides. We'll see if that works. So 6 different locations, as Brenda mentioned. We looked at the main board office, so 607 Cumberland. We know that's home to leadership, HR, finance, communications, operations, director of operation. We also looked at Indigenous education, which is on Courtney Elementary, inclusive education, which is at the Airport Elementary, information technology, which is at 2963 Vanier, international student program at 2085 Wallace, and then finally the LRC, or the Learning Resource Center and Print Shop at Glacier View Secondary. So you can see that they are quite fragmented across the district. Any potential benefits of having co-location are not met, obviously because they're in 6 different locations and across about 7.5 kilometer radius. I'm not going to get into too much detail here because I think we don't necessarily have as much time as I probably could use. But beginning at the top left-hand side, this is the 607 Cumberland Road. Key thing to note here is that the allocation of space per head count is actually quite a bit above what modern standards would be. And so at this location, there's large offices and an inefficient use of space just as a result of the existing facility that you moved into, and basically the natural progression of the space, using the space over time. So too much space here per person. But then when we look at the next figure down, which is primarily Indigenous education, is in the annex building shown here, it's a complete opposite problem. Not enough space per person, so it's very hard. There's basically no support space available, and if it is, it's completely packed with storage. So opposite problem. ISP, or International Student Program, which is the third on the left-hand side floor plan. New facility constructed recently. It's purpose-built, and so no surprise to anybody. It's actually a very functional space, and in terms of allocations of space, very efficient. Top right-hand corner, L-shaped facility, that is the Airport Elementary. As Brenda mentioned, the inclusive education is actually using old classroom spaces, and so there's a loss of efficiency there, in storage, in admin space, in all of the functionalities. Same sort of thing could be said about Glacier View, ex-classroom space being used to support more or less a warehouse function as well as the print shop. And so, again, inefficiencies associated with space, day-to-day functions just through administration functions as well as storage, circulation, that sort of thing. The last figure in your bottom right-hand screen is of information IT services. And so you can see they actually have a fairly decent arrangement of space in terms of workspace allocations per head count. It's in line with modernized standards. And so not much to be said here other than the fact that they are fragmented. They're also at a point where if they have any growth within their department, they will need to look for additional space or start decreasing the amount of space allocation per individual, which then pushes it to a below modern standard. So in summary, the 6 different locations support 88 different head count, and that's over about 2,750 component gross square meters of space. So 2,750 square meters of space. On average, that's about 30 square meters per head count. And in a traditional, purely administrative, so excluding the LRC, for instance, type of space, you'd actually expect to see that sort of between 13 for very progressive groups or 17, 18 for a more traditional office arrangement. When I say progressive, I mean towards sort of the telecommuting shared workspace standard structure versus traditional, which is individuals assigned to workstations and offices. So future space needs. So before we actually show what the future space needs are, I wanted to just identify how we went about determining what those actually are. So we include 2 different buckets of assumptions. So general planning assumptions and then department specific assumptions. So in the general bucket, This is just an example of some of them that have been included. I think there's some additional in the report. But like I said, we're planning to a 10-year future. We assume that we know that there's no organizational space allocation guide or standard that you subscribe to. So there's a little bit more flexibility on space allocation per role and per activity space. We also know that we were going to be developing the future space needs based off of an ideal condition. And then we take that ideal and then apply constraints to it. So in the perfect world, this is how much space would be required to support all of administration functions in ST71. And then lastly, we were going to assume that there was no change to the current workplace structure. When we then looked at the department-specific assumptions, and we did this for all of the different departments or functional groups that we considered, we looked at things like, in the future, psychologists would like to be able to see their students within their admin space. And so that's a slightly different type of space required to actually see students. And so we'd have to factor that in for the future space needs. Indigenous student population, we all also knew was increasing at a much faster rate. And so it didn't necessarily follow the other trajectory trends of the remaining student population. And then the last example would be that international student program wanted to grow their immigration services to the public. And so that would be a growth area for that group. So we took those two different buckets of planning assumptions, and then we developed the functional program for the future space needs. There's a few tables coming up, but I have highlighted, I think, the key information for everybody to look at. And so what I wanted to first show you is that between current today and 10-year in the future, our estimates have indicated that there will be about plus 15 headcount. So from 88 headcount to about 103. That's about a 15% increase over where you are today, and in line with student growth, as well as a number of other growth considerations that we looked at. So population across the region, demographic growth, that sort of thing. The next thing I wanted to highlight was the space allocation between current, so existing, and what we're planning for the future. So when we look at the blue boxes, so that's the net assigned area, you can see that currently there's about 2,500 square meters of space. And in our future requirements, we're actually assuming about a 16% reduction, so about 2,100 net area, net assigned area, net square meters. When we apply the component grossing factors, it jumps from 2,750, which is current state, to 2,712, 2,721. So again, pretty much on par with what you currently have. And so the future plans don't necessarily give more space to the administration functions. It's just a more efficient allocation of space. So instead of actually using classroom spaces, which we inherently know are not designed for administration functions, we're using properly designed space. And so we're actually able to keep the footprint to exactly what it is and accommodate additional staff. And the last thing that I just wanted to highlight was that exact thing. So the area per head count in the component gross area versus the future is we've decreased to about 26.4 from 31.2. So it's a step in the right direction towards a much more modern space allocation. So with that information, we did develop some options. And so we wanted to make sure that we did have some guidelines for the options, because if we're looking at this type of activity, there can be almost an infinite amount of options that we could consider. We wanted to limit it. So we looked at the existing facilities as options for some sort of development strategy, as well as two potentially new locations. So that's 2488 Idian's Way, which Brenda had talked about, and we did a preliminary space assessment in late 2021 on, and then a potentially new undetermined location. So this would be a site agnostic identification for a new development. So we came up with 4 options that were presented throughout the finalized report that we've done. Option number 1 looked at consolidating all of the administration functions within a new building at a new location somewhere within the region. So this is sort of assuming best case scenario, the district has lots of money that they want to spend on this project. What would it look like in terms of cost, as well as the functional benefits of consolidating everybody within one facility? Option number 2 took a slightly more progressive approach, where we said, okay, maybe not all in one building, but let's try to consolidate as much as possible across 3 different locations. And so LRC for the next 3 options, so 2, 3, and 4, we've assumed to be in a new building, purpose-built. It could be a lease space. It could also be not necessarily standard construction, but a sprung structure or something like that. But for the purposes of just comparing options, we've assumed that it would be a traditionally built, designed and constructed facility, purpose-built for more of a warehouse function rather than administration space, which is all the other functions of the SD71. The second location in option number 2 would be the renovation of the main office, so the board office. There's enough space there to actually include Indigenous education and inclusive education there. And so we would assume in this option that those 2 functions would be at 607 Cumberland. In the third location in option number 2, we said, okay, if you do purchase Idian's Way, we think all of the existing functions in 607 could go there. Plus you could also include IT, ISP, and the print shop. So it's a small expansion to gain all of the consolidations of the core admin, IT, ISP, and the print shop. Option number 3 was presented as sort of the most cost-efficient solution if you wanted to improve or do some of the key improvements that needed to be done. And so this included a new LRC building. It included Indigenous education and inclusive at 607 Cumberland, and then renovation to the existing footprint of Idian's Way to support the group that's currently at 607. This one assumed that ISP, print shop, and IT services did not change the location. So you can see here that it's still fragmented across 6 different locations. So not necessarily a win for everybody, and not a win for consolidation, but there would be more appropriate space. And also the key concern of freeing up more classroom space is addressed with this option as well. And then lastly, option number 4 included 2 different facilities. So a new LRC and a renovated and expanded Idian's Way. So Idian's Way can be expanded up to 2 stories and up to about 2,500 building gross square meters. And so it's basically more than double what the current facility is. And so we looked at, okay, if you did want to expand that facility to its max, what would be the cost implications of it? So option number 1, that's the one where you consolidate everybody to a single facility. Total project costs on this one estimated are around 17 million. So definitely not the cheap option for SD71, but good just to know in sort of the realm of assessing the options. Option number 2, which included 3 different facilities. So 1 new facility, which would be the LRC, and that's at a new location. So at 4.8 million. A renovation to the main office. We've assumed that there's a fairly extensive renovation taking place to provide the most suitable space for Indigenous education and inclusive education. And that would be about $2 million, but we do know the scale of that renovation could range up or more likely down in this case because it is currently configured for administration functions. And then lastly, in option number 2, we estimated that the expansion and renovation of Idian's Way would cost about 7.4 million. So total $14 million option. Option number 3, like I said, was the cost-effective option at 9.4 million, which included 3 different projects. First project being a new LRC building at 4.8, which, like I will show you in the recommendations, it could be decreased in cost likely. And 2 additional renovations, which would be the renovation of the board office and renovation of the existing footprint at Idian's Way for about 2 and 2.6 million respectively. And then no change to ISP, print shop, or IT services, and so no costs associated with those. And then lastly, option number 4 is maximizing Idian's Way. That's about 11.5 million for project costs and about the same price for the new LRC at 4.8. So all very expensive options in a cost sensitive environment. And so what we actually did in terms of our, just jumped up there. So I just wanted to summarize these quickly before we go into our recommendations. So option number 1 is the most expensive, as everybody saw. But the one thing that you didn't see there is that there is a potential, because this option and option number 4 does not require 607 Cumberland, that if you did want to divest that property or somehow leverage it to offset some of the costs associated with these options, you could potentially get rid of that facility as a way to offset costs. And so although they are the most expensive, there might be some fairly convincing reasons why, from a cost perspective, you might want to consider these options. It's also worth noting that option 1 has the least amount of disruption because you're assuming basically that all of the functions continue to exist where they are until the new facility is built, and then everybody moves over. Option number 2, sort of the key thing to say here is that the core admin functions are consolidated into 2 facilities, which is actually a pretty big win, I think, for the school district. And so between Idians Way and 607 Cumberland, the core admin functions are in those 2 locations where they're currently spread across 4 different locations. So that's a pretty big win. Option number 3 is most cost effective, but also has the least amount of improvements to admin space. And so that's been a downfall to it. Option number 4 maximizes Idians Way, which would be great, but the site itself is actually constrained in terms of its overall area. And so if you did want to expand it to 2 different stories and 2,500 building gross square meters of space, you wouldn't have enough parking. So, and where it's currently located, it's not exactly like there's parking lots all around for an overflow strategy. And so parking definitely would be a challenge. And if you considered multi-level parking or underground, the cost would skyrocket and it would very quickly be prohibitive. So, but the benefit of this one, again, like option number 1, is that you could potentially leverage 607 Cumberland to cover some of the costs. So our recommendations, we've broken it down into really 4 recommendations. So we've basically stated that we know that this is a cost-sensitive environment, and we know that there's some immediate challenges facing School District 71 with a number of teaching spaces available. And so we looked at what could be done with the least amount of upfront capital requirements and be done fairly efficiently in terms of the timeline. So we think renovating 607 Cumberland to support inclusive education and Indigenous education is probably a good place to start. Right away, that frees up some space at Airport Road for additional teaching space, and it provides a much more suitable space for Indigenous education who are bursting at the seams. Scope of this one really does depend on the details, and so we have done high-level estimates, like I said, to estimate about $2 million, but the scale of that could be tapered down quite a bit depending on detail. Second recommendation would be to renovate and do a small expansion at Idians Way, and so that would support leadership, communications, finance, and HR at a tune of about $2.6 million. And again, the scale of that could range up and down, largely to do with detail. The third would be to conduct an educational review of LRC and explore LCR, apologies, and explore the feasibility of procuring space for the LRC using alternative construction methods. And so, as I mentioned before, we assumed that it was going to be traditional construction, so traditional design and a traditional facility, but there are opportunities potentially for this type of activity to take place in a sprung structure or potentially some sort of prefabricated module or structure. And so that would definitely drive the cost down from the previously estimated 4.8 million, quite a bit cheaper than that option. So I think there's a little bit more work that needs to be done on the LRC before we can actually say what the best feature is for that group. But it's also important to say that their current space is not suitable necessarily for their functions that they're currently doing. So it definitely needs to be addressed. And then lastly, in this option, we do leave the ISP, which was in its design space in its current location, the print shop, which we do know is a little bit short on space, but there may be additional space because we're freeing up area in that facility for a bit of an expansion for the print shop. And then lastly, leave our IT services in their current location. And so no cost associated with these recommendations. And so at a very high level, that is a summary of our report that we have completed. I think that is available for this group to review. I think it's a great read. So, but if you do have any other questions that I can answer right now, I'm happy to do so.
Okay, are we able to, there we go, perfect, thank you. Okay, do we have any questions? Nope. Okay, we're going to turn it back over to our Secretary Treasurer to continue on.
Thank you, Chairperson. So now I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Kevin Reed to talk about the real estate costs and potential.
Good evening, everybody. I've been asked to speak about the real estate values of the Idians Way property. The price was set by the BC Assessment Authority based on an appraisal they had done in mid-September 2021. of 1.72 mil. Considerable time has passed since the purchase has been agreed upon, and there's been significant uplift in the purchase price since then. However, School District 71 has been locked in at their original offer price. It's worth noting that School District 71 did face buyer competition in this process. The competition was measured not so much on purchase price, but on community values. School District 71 won that competition. Valuing properties, commercial properties, is often quite a bit of art and science. There's been a number of smaller properties sell in the last 6 months that range between 12,000 square feet and say 16,000 square feet. So that's about 0.2 to 0.4 of an acre. These properties have sold anywhere from about 1.2 million to 1.6 million. The property at Idian's Way, I believe, if I remember correctly, measures 1.16 acres, and the purchase price is 1.72. The most recent comparable sale to look at to sort of draw an opinion of value for the Idian's Way property was the, excuse me for a moment, 278 Island Highway, which is the old Canadian Tire property. The property is very similar in terms of visibility, the type of structure that is placed on the property. The parts where the two properties different is merely size and scope. The Canadian Tire property is of almost 4 acres, and the building is about the same scope of magnitude larger. That sale happened in, bear with me, 2020. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm losing my battery. Oh, all right. That sale happened in 2021, and the purchase price for that property was $10,686,000. So if you look at the scope of that sale and scale it back to the Idian's Way property, that would make the Idian's Way property worth about 2.4 million at that time. If the school, my opinion of value of the Idian's Way property, if you were to go to market with it today, I think it would go to the market at about $2.5 million. I would expect a sale within 90 days, and I would expect full price or more with a number of interested parties in the property.
Thank you for that information. Did trustees have any questions regarding the real estate information? Okay, so then I'll move on towards wrapping up my presentation. And what I really wanted to talk about now was the funding. So I'm going to share my screen and just review the document that's attached in your board package on page 77. So just 1 second. Sorry, here, there we go. Oops, can everyone see the screen now? So I just, this is a spreadsheet just to identify where the funding is coming from for the potential purchase, should the board support the presentation. So as mentioned, the bulk of the money comes from the sale of the existing property at 607 Cumberland, $2,157,598. As well, part of that transaction included some prepaid rent of $322,000. We have facilities reserve of $1.3 million. So the total amount restricted for a board office in local capital reserve is $3,779,598. In addition, we've got the annual transfers that we've been putting towards a board office purchase of the $250,000, along with some other contingencies that brings the total amount of local capital available currently for a purchase of a board office at $4,130,127. And again, it's important to note that these are monies that have been set aside from the sale of the current facility, as well as transfers for this purpose over the years, which have been reflected in our financial statements. In addition, from the 2021 financial statements, note 19, the board restricted another 500,000 for the board office, knowing that we were getting to the place where we could no longer delay making a decision around replacement or increasing administrative office facilities. So that brings the total amount to 4,630,000. In addition, we have the restricted, the Minister of Education restricted capital of 301,000. And that amount is another amount that's come from the sale of the current board office. So the original board office was built in 1960. There was a 1980s renovation of which the ministry funded part of the renovation. So when the board disposed of the property in 2021, a portion of those funds were restricted for by the Ministry of Education because they originally contributed a portion of the original facility. So altogether, for the amounts that are reflected in the 2021 financial statements, we have just under $5 million available for this purchase. So the bylaw that's before the board to consider is in your board package, and it is reflected on page 78. And we would like the board to consider passing the bylaw this evening, and then we could proceed with removing the subjects off of the purchase and completing the sale. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and see if there's any questions regarding this for myself or Director Hesselgrave.
Oh, there we go. Trustee Caton.
Thank you. So I have one question, and then I'll make a comment first. So as a trustee on the Board of Education that dealt with the sale of the property, it's always been the board intent to do exactly what the Secretary Treasurer has presented tonight. It was never hidden. We were always open and front. When we sold the property that we currently sit on with the next, this was a plan going forward. It's taking some time due to many things that have happened. And I think it's a reasonable position because we've always talked about doing it, and it aligns with our strategic plan. It aligns with getting our facilities, everything into one spot. But I guess my question is, with the presentation we had tonight, there's a purchase of the building, and there has been a really big range from minimum to large on renovations and cost factors. And I'm wondering if you can explain the what next as how we'll proceed, because that was quite a big number there, which I think we need to understand where it's coming from, how do we arrive at that? And just because the recommendation is to spend I'm putting this in the atmosphere, to rent X amount of dollars doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to do that. That was just part of their recommendations and what they suggest. We don't have to do that. We can proceed cautiously within our budget. Am I correct on that?
Yes, thank you, Trustee Caton, for that question. And that was the, when we were working with Cornerstone throughout this process, you know, we really stressed to them the concept that the district has limited resources and we need to be very prudent in how we allocate those resources. And so we tried to approach it from a phased approach. It's starting with, is that property, could it work for us? Is it value adding for the district? And throughout the due diligence, we determined that it was. And then once we, if the board supports the bylaw, then we would go through the process of determining exactly what a renovation would cost, how we would transform the space into purposes for ourselves, and go through that, and we would present to the board better information around what those costs would be. But I think we can definitely say that those would be the high end of the projections. Ian and his staff are excellent. They really, go out of their way to reduce the costs and recognize that those are, we're publicly funded education dollars, and we need to be careful with how we apply it. And so I can let Director Hesselgrave talk a little bit about potential costs for a renovation.
I think those comments are really valid. Is that when we look at doing a renovation, we particularly need to look at the 607 Cumberland Road and decide what direction are we going. If we're moving inclusive ed and Indigenous, what that costing from Cornerstone entails is us gutting the building and transitioning it. And I don't think that is anywhere in our thinking at all, particularly for a building that's in essence a rental for us. So we would look at doing some reasonable and prudent upgrades to a building like this. That's why you see a number, say $200,000, because there's be a few windows, a few odds and ends. And then after that, we need to transition what is an open space into a space that works for an educational environment as opposed to an assessment center. So we would again take a prudent, thoughtful look at that and see what do we need for open space, office space, and how do we get there? So we could absolutely transition it. And in terms of the other things, like the Learning Resources Center, which is a key component of our educational support right now, it's a deep dive look into that. What form should it take? And what are the pressures to move them? And when would that become present? Because it's certainly that pressure isn't today. So I think we can reasonably and prudently assume that well within the figures that the Secretary Treasurer presented, that we could very adequately renovate the Indians Way facility and the board office to consolidate admin services, with ultimately that goal of opening up classroom spaces, which are exceptionally valuable and very expensive to create.
Great, thank you. And we have Trustee McDonald with a question.
Chairperson, before we go to Trustee McDonald's question, I'm noting the time and wondering if we need to do a motion to extend perhaps to 9:15 or 9:30 before we proceed with further discussions around this.
Okay.
I was just wondering if we should do that, and I would be happy to make a motion to extend our meeting up to 9:30.
And I'll second that.
Thank you, both of you. And this needs to be unanimous, or did we change?
We changed it to majority.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone opposed? Okay, we're good to carry on until up to 9:30. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure we won't meet that time, but it's just, we'll let you all go home before that. Yeah, I'm interested in what that process is, and Director Husgrave has really helped a lot. I'm prepared to support the purchase of the Idians Road property, but there are so many problems with the next step, and I feel like we really need a lot of more thought and conversation. There are several other options that leap to my mind. I'd be interested to see if you might include international student program in the 607 building with the others, if we might not need the boardroom anymore, or would the LRC be a good partner at our Comox site with the international student program? Could we make more use of that building in order to clear classroom space? And as you say, how urgent is the classroom space in Glacier View really needed? So there's so much scope here, but the value here of the Idians building, I think, was made quite clear that that's a good competitive price. And should we in future move towards consolidating everything in one building and getting rid of the 607 property, or have that part of another project that we might work on with partners, the Idians Road building will have value to be sold. There's certainly going to be a demand for that as from other parties, I would imagine. And maybe Mr. E can confirm that, but it just seems like this is a good move. I do note that in the recommendation order, I think we should do the reno and expansion at Idians before we renovate 607 for those programs, because if we move them in, I don't know what are you camping out in the parking lot at Idians? I don't know. I'm sure that Director Hasselgrave will do his usual magic on project management and all of the drawings that we need. So that's all.
Great, thank you, Trustee McDonald. Any other questions from trustees?
So I'm going to move the recommendation. I didn't see anybody's have a hand up, and I'm conscious of the time.
Thank you.
And the recommendation is that the bylaw for 2488 Indians Way, Comox be given first reading.
And do I have a second for that? Thank you, Trustee May. And anyone opposed? That's carried unanimously.
I have the paper in my hand, so I'll continue.
I can happily do the second. I can do the second one. I've got paper in my hand too. That the bylaw for 2488 Indians Way, Comox be given second reading.
Thank you, Trustee Waite, and Trustee May second, and anyone opposed? Okay, and here's where we need to be unanimous again for this reading. Do you want to do this one, Trustee Caton?
Sure. Recommendation that in accordance with section 68.4 of the School Act, all three readings of the bylaw for 2488 Indians Way, Comox be given at tonight's meeting.
And do I have a second? Thank you, Trustee Hawksby. And I'm going to do this one a little differently. All those in favor?
Just to, before we, sorry.
Yes.
Vote, I just need to clarify, I think Trustee Keaton mentioned Comox, but the property is actually 2488 Indians Way in Courtney.
So I'll reread it. Sorry, I'm just reading it off the thing here, so I'll change it.
Yeah, no problem. It's the Comox Valley School District that's buying it, but the property is actually located in Courtney.
Okay. Yeah, because it's on the paper Comox, but that's okay. I'll just redo it. Recommendation that in accordance with section 68.4 of the School Act, all three readings of the bylaw for 2488 Indians Way, Courtney be given at tonight's meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then we'll go for, yes.
Superintendent.
Just a point of order, I think all three readings have to be read again because they all referred to Comox. So
I'll start over.
Okay, sorry, folks. I know people are tired. It's a long night.
Okay, so I'll start over and I'm going to write it down here, Courtney. Okay, so number one, recommendation that the bylaw for 2488 Indians Way, Courtney be given first reading.
Okay, and then Trustee May is going to second that. And anyone opposed? Okay, and on to the second one.
That the bylaw for 2488 Indians Way, Courtney be given second reading.
Thank you. And then Trustee Hawksby, were you going to be a second on that one? Thank you. Figured we might as well stay in order.
Okay, so
and then anyone opposed? Okay, and then there you go, Trustee Caton.
The recommendation that in accordance with section 68.4 of the School Act, all three readings of the bylaw for 2488 Indians Way, Courtney be given at tonight's meeting.
Thank you. And then we have Trustee May will second that. And then all those in favor of all three readings tonight. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, so
one more time.
Okay, that the bylaw for 2488 Indians Way, Courtney be giving third and final reading.
And a second for that. Thank you, Trustee McDonald. And any further discussion or debate? Okay, and all those in favor of the third and final reading? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Okay.
Thank you, Chairperson.
So now we are on to board business, correct?
Actually, the motion is to recommend the Board of Education receive the Facilities Committee, the whole board as presented.
Thank you. I missed that one. There's so many readings. Thank you. And so a second for.
Excuse me for interrupting. If I'm no longer needed, would you guys mind if I beg off the call?
Thanks, Kevin.
Just
Thank
want
you
to
so
say
much.
thank you very much for your professional expertise in this matter.
You bet. Have a good night, everybody. Enjoy
You
your
too.
evening.
Good night.
Sorry. And so that was Trustee Waite that seconded for the facilities. Yeah. Okay. And anyone opposed? That one's carried. Okay. Now we're on to board business. And I just lost the agenda. Eh. Sorry. Okay. So we have notice of motion, formal acknowledgement of climate crisis. Sheila or Trustee McDonald, you're deferring this until next month, correct?
Yes, I am. With your indulgence, it was to bring it back again. I knew that this agenda would be quite substantial, and I've been working on some other things as well. So just give it a little more time.
Great, thank you. We look forward to hearing from you next month on it.
Yeah, but just send me a little reminder about the agenda day.
Okay. Board correspondence. We have a letter from Minister Whiteside and Minister Chen, just providing us with the letter of us, the accountability for childcare transitioning to the Ministry of Education. So that's very exciting news. Trustee Waite.
I think the superintendent had his hand raised. He might have been mentioning the agenda item that we needed to cover, but maybe not. So there was an additional agenda items that Trustee Caton added.
Yes, that was supposed to be under board business. I am so sorry, Trustee Caton, you should have just yelled at me because I'm looking at this instead of at the screen. I apologize, everybody.
That's okay. Don't worry about it. I would have gotten you before we adjourned. It's okay. Before I do my PC report, I just want to take the opportunity to acknowledge that it's Black History Month this month, and all the work that we do to support all our communities, and the fact that the Ministry of Education is working with the Black History group to incorporate Black history in our curriculum, and I look forward to that. Provincial Council met last weekend, and for the first time ever, we did not have any motions, but 3 things came out of that. One is the BCSDA budget that we will be approving at AGM, and that is where we have BCSD fees, which are based on student enrollment. So that's coming up, and I will pass that on to trustees. You guys can have a look at it and give me back your feedback. And the other one as AGM will be the pre-conference is called A Day of Healing, is where they are working with our Indigenous elders, and it's going to be focused on Indigenous learning, and they're actually transforming the conference center to a log, I can't think what they're calling it, to an Indigenous theme. So it's going to be really exciting and quite inspirational and quite humiliating and touching. And I think it's going to really get us to think when they talk about a day of healing. The last 2 years have been very trying times for all of us. It's brought a lot of emotions up, some good, some so not good. And that's why the focus is looking how to heal and work together and work past all the challenges we've had over the last couple of years. And finally is the festival report and looking on school districts dealing with some work on strategic plan and student enhancement. So that's all coming up for trustees to look at. Is those are new things. There'll be lots of reading, lots of homework. And I know I told you guys there's 1 meeting a month way back when, and you haven't forgiven me for that, but there's going to be the student enhancement framework for learning. I'm sure if the superintendent could touch on, that's coming down to us with some work on that. I'm not sure when that's going to be out there. Superintendent DeMayo, they touched on that coming for boards to look at, and there'll be lots of work on that and reporting on your end.
Yeah, that's correct. We'll definitely, as we transition from our current strategic plan into the development of the new one, there's a lot of work that'll have to happen. Currently, we're trying, one of our requirements is to make sure our budgets and our spending is tied into our framework. And we did get jumpstart a lot of this where our school goals are tied into our framework. But yeah, there's a lot of work that we need to do to make sure we're all aligned and our goals are all directed back to our strategic plan.
And the final one will touch base with what Trustee McDonald was talking about is the BCSD Climate Action Committee, and how do we talk about how we're aligning our budgets and climate and all that. So those are some of the long range goals the districts will be looking at, and it's just bringing that heads up. But more work to do as our roles of trustees as we move forward to the next school year. And that's my report.
Great. Thank you so much, Trustee Caton. I'd like to do a little shout out to our Secretary Treasurer, who has been working on the FESL report, along with all of the other reports she's been working on. So thank you very much for that. And I believe that brings us to our public question period. Sean, do we have any questions sitting there? That's okay. I saw you unmute, so I knew you were there. No questions. And as always, the public is welcome to email us any questions that they have. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's been a long evening and 6 minutes past when we would normally have ended. So thank you to everybody. And I'm looking for someone to move us to move a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Trustee May. And a second. Oh, no one wants to adjourn? Thank you, Trustee Caton. Thank you so much to everybody. We are adjourned.